Hello. I hope you're doing fantastic. I'm doing great. Welcome to another video. Now, in this video, I will be sharing with you all the books I read for the month of March, if I attained my goal, all that good stuff, and hopefully make it as short as I possibly can, because y'all know I like to ramble. But anyways, please stay put and let's get into it.
Share with your friends through any kind of weather. Library without borders, we're reaching for the sky. Join the journey now, come on, don't be shy.
Jambo, Karibu, welcome to my channel. My name is Chilanda and this is Library Without Borders. Okay, all right, you guys. So y'all know that the world is upside down. You know, one thing I've said before is that I like to read historical fiction, because reading about the events of this world, sometimes in non-fiction form, is way heavy. So I like to consume them in fictional form, because even though events are usually have occurred, some of the characters may have been invented by the authors. And I've always said that the reason why I read is because I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to be part of the problem. And I don't want to repeat history. There are certain histories that we can repeat, maybe like fashion, you know. But most of the time, the reason why we read is to be educated and to avoid repeating history. And boy, oh boy, today, the world in which we live in is unfortunate, you know, from what's going on in the United States to what's going on in Congo versus Rwanda, Ukraine versus Russia. Now Macron, who's the president of France, is trying to get like Europeans into war. Then you have what's going on in Palestine and Israel, and then you have whatever's going on in Sudan, and then basically the United States against the world. Elon Musk and his South Africanness that somehow is also now a problem. It's a lot, right? It's a lot that's going on in this world. But thanks, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, okay, Chilanda, you are reading, you are learning about, you know, fights, things that happened in the past to understand the current world in which we live in. And still, I am baffled that in my 37 years on this earth, with everything I've learned, we are back to talking about subjects like segregation. And I know this concerns the United States, not the rest of the world, but you know, and welcome to this shit show that this life is. Anyways, you guys, so like I said, in today's video, I want to talk to you about the books I read for the month of March. And I read a total of 8 books actually. So I listened to 2 and read 6 books. Now, I usually don't go in, you know, by order that I read, but I know the first book I read. So this is my pile of books, by the way. So these are the books I read. Let's talk about them. First, I want to talk about this book. Now, so the first book I read was The House of Fortune by Jessie Burton. This book was, what is it about? Y'all, I read at the beginning, so let me just remember the character and I'll be able to quickly tell you what it was about. So, Amsterdam in the year 1705, okay. The Brent's 18th birthday. Okay. So this story, real quick, and I'm going to try my best to really summarize this book for you. So Thea, as you can tell, is born in Amsterdam during the year 1705. Now, what's special about Thea is that she's turning 18. Yay for Thea. But there's something particular about Thea. She's mixed. Her mom was white and then her dad is black. And she's currently living with her dad and her aunt. Now, the aunt is not directly related to the dad. She's white, and she's not related to the mom. she's related by marriage because Thea's mom had a brother who married the aunt. What's the aunt's name? Nella. Yes, Nella. So that's how Nella, Thea, and the dad are basically related, and they're living in this home. So long story short, she's about to turn 18. Now, the only thing is, there are secrets that are hidden that the father and Nella are not telling Thea, but then they know that because of Thea's race, she actually does need to get married. But then y'all know it's 1705, okay? Like I was saying, so Thea is living in a world where it's not common for a mixed race to marry, whites. But there's also a problem of finances going on in their family. So what's going on is that they are facing financial ruins, and in 1700s you had to marry well in order to get back a bit of that wealth or to get out of being ruined. So Nella decides to talk to Thea's father, and is like, we need her to go to, how do you call them, balls, those parties where they would bring the young girls for them to be chosen for a potential marriage. So obviously Thea's father is against it. He's like, that it's Amsterdam. Even though racism, like, this book was not about like slavery or anything like that, but it was peculiar to see a mixed race in white spaces. So she was a curiosity, right? So Nella is like, okay, well, if we don't find marriage for her, we will be ruined, And then Nella's father was like, but you have a property. And it's true, Nella has a property, but then, like I said, remember the secrets? There are secrets that she's hiding from Otto. Otto is the dad, and also from Thea, right? So she's like, no, we can't sell that property. He's like, why not? She's like, no, it's out of the question. That property was her childhood home, and things happened there, and she just doesn't want to sell that property. Okay, apart from that, Otto finally gives in and is like, okay, Thea, can get married if we find somebody that will marry her. No problem. But the only thing is, Thea loves theater, and she's been going to watch shows at the theater for a while. Unbeknownst to her family, Thea has started a love affair with a renowned painter, and that painter is white, and she's turning 18, so she's very young. He's about 26, so she's really in love. And then she obviously doesn't want to get married, she wants to marry him. So during that time, first of all, you had to be also a virgin, right? And she decides she's gonna disobey her family, and she got together with the painter. But y'all, the painter is now being honest with Thea. That man isn't who he seems. So I'm not gonna tell you, but just know that Thea, when she finds out, all hell breaks loose. And at the same time, there is a man that does propose marriage to Thea, but obviously Thea, having found out what she's found out and being involved with that painter, she's not into it, but she will come to terms with her fate, knowing that she obviously doesn't have a lot of choices. But like I said, a lot of things will happen, like Nella and Thea and Otto will have to face their past, will have to unveil certain secrets. And in the midst of that, before I forget, what really is important in this story is that there is this miniaturist, and it's this person who, makes these little miniatures. And one day a little miniature of the painter is dropped in front of Thea's house. So she's freaking out. She's like, if her family sees that, they will wonder, who's this man? But then she looks at it and she's like, wow, And then there's also a servant. I'm gonna conclude, y'all. See, that's how I get into it, because now the story comes back in my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, there's this part, or there's this part, but it's all gonna tie together. But yeah, one day the servant of the house sees that there's another package that's dropped, and this time it's like a little house. And then she's afraid, remember there are secrets in this house that Thea doesn't know. So she's going to see Thea. She's like, did you see anything amiss? And she's like, no. Thea's not letting anybody know that she received a package of the painter. But then this time there's also this other package that is dropped, also, like I said, a miniature of a house. And the servant knows, Thea knows, and she's like, well, it's a package, it was written to Thea. So long story short, Thea convinces the servant that it's something and nothing that the servant should worry about. No problem. Thea takes the package and then discover, like I said, the miniature. So that miniaturist and those little miniatures houses that are being dropped at the house, some were also dropped in the past when Thea's mom was alive. That's it, y'all. That's all I'm gonna say. I hope you're not confused, but if you're interested enough to find out what this miniaturist has to do with Thea, Otto, Nella, and that whole house, then I suggest you pick up the book and discover. Like I said, it has nothing to do with enslavement or anything like that. It's just almost like a love story, set in the 1700s in Amsterdam. Okay, so I rated this 3 stars. 3 stars mean I recommend. It's not spectacular, it's not underwhelming. It was a good read. Next, I read Allegedly. Allegedly. Oh, Tiffany D. Jackson, she does these thrillers like no one can. But anyways, it's Allegedly. So the story is about Mary B. Apparently Mary B was babysitting, right, with her mom. She was babysitting their neighbor's son, who was like a few months old, like just a newborn there, an infant. And Lord behold, she's accused of having killed that child. So she is in prison. Well, not quite prison, but like it's house, it's not a house arrest, but it's one of those centers, baby jail. That's what they call it. She's in a baby jail. She's living in this prison with a couple of girls who've done different crimes, okay? But as she is in that baby jail, she's also finding love. She met this young man who's also charged for something, and they're both, no, he's 18, she's 16, y'all. And then something develops between them, and it's cute. And at the same time, while this is developing between them, she gets pregnant, you know what I mean? And now the stakes have changed. Yeah, now she's thinking about that night and how that night unfolded. She was quite young. I think she was 9 years old when the alleged crime occurred. And her relationship with the mom is not as it seems, y'all. It is not as it seems. Her mom goes to church, but her relationship with the men in her life is it's what it is. She usually goes out with men for, who are able to give her something materialistically speaking. But also there seems like there's some kind of instability with her mom. And that night she was there with the mom, and I think the beginning of the story is that the baby was crying, and then the mom asked Mary B to bring something for the child, and then the details are blurry. I don't want to say too much. The details are blurry because I don't want to tell the story, okay? And now that she's in prison, she's pregnant. She knows that she can't have a baby in prison. So that's when she begins to come up with a plan, like forge a plan with her boyfriend, the father of her child, to be like, you know what, I need to get out of here and you need to help me. At some point they come up with a plan of escaping. Yeah, I don't know how sustainable that idea was, but then she talks to her mom. There's a conversation where her mom comes to prison and she's talking to Mary B, and Mary B is like, Mom, it's time for you to to come out, say something. And her mom's like, what are you talking about, baby girl? What are you talking about? And mom's like, and she's like, you've got to say something because you told me if I did this, since I'm a baby, like they won't hurt you. Like there's some plan that was discussed between the mom and Mary B. and it makes you feel like, did she commit the crime? Did the mom commit the crime? Like I know y'all, but I can't tell you, so y'all gotta read. So I'm gonna conclude this because when it comes to thrillers, we can't be saying too much. The twist, I was like, okay, he's gonna give birth, right? And also, oh, I forgot, the baby that perished, sorry, that it's triggering, sorry, I forgot to mention at the beginning, please look out for the trigger in this book, because it talks about, how do you call that, a child dying. So it's a white child, you know what I mean? And obviously you guys can just imagine, right, in the society that we live in, a black girl kills a baby infant. Y'all can tell, right? So anyways, yeah, so there was that aspect and the twist. I read the book and I read the twist and I was like, no, I was like, just when I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, somebody better come out and say something. And I'm like, oh, somebody's playing games for real. Oh my God, like, she is conniving. Y'all know about who I'm talking about? Ooh. Okay. So this is a 4 out of 5. Like, I recommend for a thriller. I was in love. Okay, I was in love. Then I read The Push. First of all, clap for me because I read a book by a Canadian author. And all the books were written by women, so I'm proud of that.
Yes! Randy Watson! That boy is good.
So The Push is by Ashley Audrain, okay? I have something to say. Again, trigger. It's again about child dying. So this story is about Blythe. It's multi-generational, by the way. You have Blythe, her mom, and her mom. And then you have Violet, who's Blythe's daughter. And Violet and Blythe are like the two main characters. And we hear of the mom's mom to Blythe, okay? So Blythe and Violet, yeah, Violet. So the way the story begins, obviously you hear about Blythe's mom. Okay, I don't want to confuse you guys with the mothers, but Blythe is married to a handsome man, and the way the story is written is basically she's telling you, the reader, but you, the reader, in the story is her partner, her husband. So she's speaking to her husband, but like to you, the reader. Like, let me just read a sentence so you know. You slid your chair over and tapped my textbook with the end of your pencil, and I stared at the page, hesitant to look up. Hello? I had answered you like a phone call. You see? That's how she speaks. That's how the whole book is written. So what happens is that, like I said, she's in love with her husband. Everything goes well, and they're talking about marriage. But then at the back of her head, she has a bit of hesitation because she knows the history of her mother as well as her grandmother and great-grandmother. Maybe let's go back to the two mothers. So, and that puts doubts in her about if she is fit to be a good mom. So her boyfriend then is like, no, you would be a good mom, you're not your mom, and all like that and all that stuff. So they get married and she gets pregnant, and already the symptoms of her pregnancy, she's already going through it. By the time Violet is born, there seems to be a disconnect between Violet and Blythe, and from that point on you follow her and Violet and how she's not able to feed Violet, like she won't latch on to her, like her boobs to get to drink the milk, like she would cry a lot. But then when the father would come, she would be quiet, and from then on something developed between Blythe and Violet. Fast forward, they're growing up, there seems to be even more of a, how do you call that, like more like they're drawn away from each other, you know what I mean? Like, as moms, we are connected to our children, but then something is off with Violet, you know what I mean? Something is really off. Like, the things she was saying in this book, I was like, yo, like, what the fuck, And I think this book was speaking to the fact that as moms, we don't want to see certain signs that our children may be deranged. Okay? There may not be right in their mind. Okay? Because yeah, they're children. They're innocent, right? So they're not supposed to be evil. But like the book says, the push. One day, Blythe and Violet go to the park. And then, they're playing. Children are playing in the park. And then she sees her daughter playing with this boy high up on the slide. And then something happens. But then Violet was beside that boy. And then there's certain doubts that starts to develop between Blythe about her daughter. She's like, okay, did I see? What did I see? What did I see? Did I see something? And when she tries to talk to her husband's like, oh no, you're tired, and this and that. Like, he keeps pushing away the things she's saying. Like, no, blaming it on the fact that she's tired. But at the same time, knowing the history of Blythe and the mothers in her lineage, he's starting to look at her like, maybe you're not so fit. And she's like, okay, fine, whatever. But she does try to get closer to Violet, but like as she grows, this kid has problems at school. I mean, where they heard stories like violence stories, and the father keeps like dismissing like it's nothing, no problem. I'm gonna conclude, y'all, so I'm gonna really tell you my thoughts about how the mom's behavior. I felt like she really did not deal with this, but that's my opinion. So anyways, few years after she becomes a mom for the second time, she gives birth to her son. And then the son, there's connection there. She loves the son, and the way the story is written, you can see that there's a connection with her son. She loves her son. He's playful and all that stuff. And then it seems like Violet also was having a good time with the son, until I don't want to say too much, but all I want to say, okay, is like, call me petty. I feel like the way the mom handled everything, she had instinct. Like, you need to follow your mother instinct sometimes. Like, what you first see and think is that, okay? But I can't tell you the rest of the story, but just know that yeah, she was Violet got away with things. But I'm trying to think that she's 6. I think she's 6 by the last time some kind of incident happened. What would you have done? What could you have done? How could you have said, how could have made sense of what happened and make it make sense to everybody else that's that's on the outside? Anyways, and before I conclude this story, something does occur with the husband, and another woman comes into the picture. Okay, that's it. So it's 2.75 out of 5. I struggle with giving a 3 star. It's a good story. I would definitely recommend if you're a thriller type of reader. I think it's good to read if you're in a book club. For mothers out there, it's triggering. But yeah, 2.75 out of 5 star. And yes, Jessica, y'all know Jessica, she's the one who suggested this book to me. So thanks, Jessica. I enjoyed it. Next, I read Mademoiselle Revolution. Yo, I tapped this book. Now, I have to make this review short. I don't want it to be too long, but it's by Zoe Sivak. So this story begins in Saint-Domingue. As y'all know, I love me anything that has to do with Haiti, okay? Like the history of Haiti. I love the history of Haiti. So as soon as she talked about Saint-Domingue, the revolts of enslavement people, I was like, I was there. So what happens is that at the beginning we have this young girl. What's her name? Sylvie de Rosier. Sylvie de Rosier is mixed. Her mom was an enslaved woman. Her dad is white. But unlike other enslaved people, she is living with the planter. Like, the dad decided to, like, I guess, free her. So he's living with the father, and her 2 brothers were perfectly white. Okay, blonde and all that good stuff. One is very close to Sylvie. The other one is evil, the evil brother, and he's for the enslavement of the Haitians or the people of Saint-Domingue, whereas the other one, he's just like a bystander. He's like not saying anything against or not for it, but he's very close to Sylvie. So at the dawn of the revolt, the dad is like, we have to go, you know. So they flee. That brother, the evil brother, is like, no, you are property, blah blah blah. Yo, he gets unalived, as he should have been. Anyways, so Sylvie and her brother, they run to France. In France, they have an aunt who's the sister of the father. The father refuses to go to France because he doesn't believe that this revolt is the end of it. It's the end of enslavement. Like, he feels like it's just a little uprising and things will get back to normal. Okay. So anyways, and that causes strife between the two kids and him. So anyways, most of the story now happens in France, and it's during the Révolution. Remember the French Revolution? 1791, and they have the dates, y'all. I like that every chapter she had a quote. There's so many things, but let me just read you a couple so y'all can see. White masters and their wandering hands left more than one slave heavy with child. Sylvie's mother had been one of them. There was no bonding between mulattoes and slaves. Mulattoes like Sylvie built their success on distancing themselves from their African roots. To them, whiteness was a way of life. Y'all see this? Now, this particular paragraph doesn't surprise me because I realized I had read about this back in the books that that talked about the Haitian, about the Saint-Domingue revolts and Toussaint Louverture's story. And I had heard about how, mulattoes and the people that were closer to white skin tended to separate themselves from blacks. And even today, I think it's still prominent that there are certain black people that just want to separate themselves from their Africanness. That's another subject that I've already tackled. That's not the time. But I like this quote. It says, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know." I like that. By William Wilberforce. So this story is about Sylvie in France. And it is also, like I said, at the dawn of the French Revolution. And y'all, this book had so much unaliving. That French Revolution, y'all, do you know the story of the French Revolution? There was so much death that occurred because there was a change between monarchy and the working class. You know what I mean? So let's just see. The poor whispered about a rebellion similar to the one at the Bastille, about gutting their impotent sovereign and killing his wife in their virtual prison within the decaying Tuileries Palace. The masses blamed this war on the royal family. They assumed the absurd Duke of Brunswick came to the king's aid like a mindless hound. Yo, when I say that there were reasons, because the working class were poor and stuff like that, and they'd had enough of the monarchy, and they have this guy Robespierre who was leading the revolution. Yes, Robespierre was one of the men who was leading the French Revolution, and once the working class had enough, they decided that they were gonna unalive these kings and queens and whoever was associated with them. Like, in one day there was massacres that occurred, like the way she described the guillotine, people being hung, mutilated, all kinds of death, and Sylvie witnessed all of it. Now the story with Sylvie is that when she was in Saint-Domingue, she didn't do anything to fight for the blacks there. So when she came here, she was now trying to fight for righteousness. She didn't want to just stay there and not do anything. She wanted to take control of her destiny, basically, right? And she got in the circle of Robespierre and those people that were in the revolution, including this girl. What's her name? Cornélie. Yes. So, and Cornelie was a woman. And during that time, you guys know that women are not really that involved in politics, so they had to do their politics, you know, hidden. And she met this white girl, white French woman. Her name was Cornelie. And Cornelie, although involved with Robespierre and the rest of the revolution members, she also was part of another group of just women who also on the low involved in influencing the French Revolution. But something developed between Sylvie and Cornelie. They actually had a love affair happening between them two. Long story short, you guys, like I said, it was a lot of killing till basically that's the story. Like that's the gist of Mademoiselle Révolution, this mixed girl who's basically trying to decide her destiny amidst a time that was fraught with war, with cruelty, with racism, with all of that stuff, right? And what you also learn in France is that France is not too aware of what's going on in Saint-Domingue. They hear the rumors, you know, the echoes of like slavery in Saint-Domingue, but they're not really aware of the cruelty that happens in Saint-Domingue. So she also is called by Robespierre to be like, can you talk about your experience there, or at least the experience of black women? And I want to read that speech. It was beautiful. I think I saved it. Let me see, y'all. I need to find that speech. I liked it. Now listen to this. Most mulattoes' stories mirror mine. Mulattoes follow wherever black bondage goes. Mulatto babies are the cruelest symptom of the disease of slavery. We remind white wives that their husbands are unfaithful, and remind black men that their masters can defile their wives on a whim. I may have half brothers and sisters already dead, taken by suffering or by their war for freedom. I will never know their names. So this is her speaking in front of like the white French people. Whether black or white, our skin determines the certain types of clothes, entertainments, positions, and marriage partners we may have. Free but not equal. More than a slave but less than a citizen. White men think that because I came from the union of a white man and a slave, I am this vessel of carnality and pleasure, one they can own and exploit. I feel a constant isolation and fear, afraid of man, afraid men will hurt me because of their assumptions regarding my character. Lastly, she finished, white, black, or mulatto, we all should be born free. Slavery is an evil in and of itself, but its cruelty is far-reaching. I implore you, fellow citizens, to right a wrong so heinous that it will stain us for generations to come. Let my brothers and sisters in Saint-Domingue know the meaning of liberté, égalité, and fraternité. Yeah, I cried. I loved this speech. Oh my gosh, this book was amazing. It was a bit slow at the beginning, but I love this book. So it's 4 out of 5 for me, y'all. Like, these are my kind of books, you know what I mean? Like, there was so much discussed in this book. A little bit of a love scandal during the 1700s. Like, come on. But a good book and all. So next, I listened to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Dream Count. Okay, so obviously this was a new release by Chimamanda Ngozi, and there was a lot of hype about this book. Now, did it deliver? I mean, if you love Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's work, regardless of what she writes, I think you'd love her work, you know, and even her as a person, as an author, if you've listened to her speech, her talk, and, you know, whatever work she comes up with, I think you're gonna like. So this story follows, like, I think 4 women. We have Zipporah, Amalogo, Kadiatu, and Chiamaka. So real quick, Chiamaka's story, we followed Chiamaka during COVID-19, right? During the pandemic. And Chiamaka is talking to us and going through her past relationships. And there's one that I just want to talk about when it comes to Chiamaka, is the relationship she had with Darnell. He's, you know, African American. And there was a conversation that was happening between Omelogo and Chiamaka and Darnell. So Darnell is obviously, he studied a lot and he's like way very well educated, and he, you know, they go to dinner and there's a whole conversation that comes up, and it's about, slavery. And he's mad because he feels like Chiamaka's parents are like overly rich, and he makes a comment. Because Chia's people probably sold my people. All that old Igbo money going back centuries, they sold more than palm fruit on that West African coast because they certainly made a killing. So you can tell that there's some kind of bitterness, animosity in Darnell. And I think that's a reflection of a lot of African Americans. And I'm saying this because, like I said, I've seen quite a lot of videos circulating about how certain black people in America feel about Africans. So that conversation I thought was really pertinent. And there's a way Omilogo responds to Darnell. So Omilogo answers this way. There's of course there's hierarchy. One system was much more barbaric than the other. That's a fact. Igbo slave traders could never have imagined the transatlantic slave trade because it was nothing like slave they knew. The Europeans and Americans industrialized slavery. They turned people into things like bits of wood. A piece of wood can never be part of your family. A piece of wood can never be human. In Igbo land, a slave was still human. That's Omilogo explaining that conversation. So anyways, long story short, that's basically, what's going on Chiamaka. We go through different partners. There was one who was white with whom she was involved, but he was married. And there was another one. That was Chiamaka. Then we have Zipporah. Zipporah, her story is that, she goes to school. She's a lawyer. She gets involved with another Nigerian student, and obviously they're all older women, right? That's also one aspect of this story. They're all older women, and there's that, prevalent saying in African societies that when you become a certain age, you pass marriage, and now people are worried about you having children and stuff like that. So Zipporah talks to her guy, and they're like, we can have children and stuff like that. And basically Zipporah's story, she ends up a scorned woman, and at the core of what she goes through, you discover her story about her life, especially about her mom. Her mom is the second wife to her Nigerian father. No, she's the first wife, but because she was struggling to have more children after Zipporah, then in that culture you are allowed to take a second wife, in order to have children. So there was a strain that happened in the relationship of Zipporah and her mom. So you also hear about that. And like I said, you hear about her going to school, studying, and going through it, and also raising that child, being a single mom. At the same time, I want to talk about Kadiatu. Kadiatu is the story that is actually the biggest story. I will have to reread this book because I need to highlight certain parts, because I was listening to this on audio, so I didn't have the opportunity to sit with the book and highlight certain things. But one aspect that I liked about the book was also the many places that the women traveled and were located in. She talked about New Guinea, I think it's Cochrane, or France, and all those places, Nigeria, the United States, London, you know what I mean? They traveled around the world, especially for Chiamaka. Chiamaka is an author, and while she was having that relationship with Darnell, she was trying to read about food experiences, wherever she traveled. So I like that aspect as well. So going back to Kadiatu, I think is she in New Guinea? She's somewhere in Africa, and she's Muslim. Okay, she's Muslim, and she works for Kadiatu's family. Now her story is particular because she went through something very cruel, her and her sister. And unfortunately, y'all have heard about women's circumcision, and she went through it, her sister went through it, and unfortunately her sister passed on. That's one aspect of Kadiatu's life. But fast forward, because there's a lot of things that happen in these women's life. Kadiatu is married to a man. But unfortunately, there's something that happens with that man. So she marries him. They have a child, but I don't know what's going on. But since she's Muslim, she doesn't feel comfortable with her men drinking. And one day, Karietu, like, I guess, talks about praying for her men, for something to happen to her men. But anyways, something does happen to her men, and he passed on. So now she's left with her child. I think she also lost a child. I think she lost a child, and then she got a girl. And while she's somewhere there in Africa, I think she's back in Nigeria. Yo, I'm confused, okay? But she meets this man. Did she meet him, or it's the same guy that she was promised to when she was young? And then they go. Confusion, but something happens while the husband is obviously dead. She continues to live on, but she has to find a job, and then she finds a job at this store. And one day there's a man. Unfortunately, something bad happens to her. That man does something horrible to her, and that will stay in her mind. And it's important to know that, because when she travels to the United States, her story, which is based on a true story, will become headline in the United States, because something similar again will happen in the United States. So Karietu will travel to the United States in order to give her child a better education, a better future, like all of us immigrants do. We go to these Western countries to have better opportunities, the immigrant experience. So long story short, she arrives there. She's with Omilogo and Zipporah, and then they're like the group, and they found, actually it's the guy with her. They're supposed to be together. I don't know if they're married. Do they marry? I think they marry. And he tells her that, oh yeah, there's this job as a maid, in a hotel and all that stuff, and something does happen to him. He goes to prison, the man. But now Karietu is again alone, raising her child alone. But then she does have a job, and that job is working as a maid in a hotel. And unfortunately, like I said, something horrible does happen again. And this time, it's someone in, how do you call it? A man of high stature, or like a white prominent man, like a rich guy, you know what I mean? And he forces himself on Karietu, and that story will basically be the story of that time and will make headlines. And it's to the point where Karietu just didn't want to go ahead and press charges, or go to the hospital, do tests and all that stuff, because unbeknownst to her, she had no idea what that will, how to explain that? Her going to the hospital, to the police would basically like open a Pandora box. You know what I mean? And now the whole world was choosing sides. You have this immigrant black woman, who's probably not the most gorgeous girl, who is accusing this white French guy of the R word. And people are just like, well, he could get anybody, so why her? And that's a conversation as well that Zipporah, Chiamaka, Omilogo will all have. Because, yeah, in the midst of it, you also have her daughter who's in there and who's just like trying to be with her mom, because, she's Muslim and she has to be in front of these cameras and all that stuff and talking about personal things, go through like do these tests and all that stuff. And it's taking a toll on her. So that story was really heartbreaking, but also you get to Omilogo's story. Omilogo works in Nigeria, and she's always worked in Nigeria. Her story is that she did come to the United States to study, but I guess there's an experience that she had when she was young as a student, and it wasn't a good experience. And then she went back to Nigeria, and there she works with some corruptible Nigerian man, and she decides to use some of those funds and help women. Now, I'm not sure her methods was what's the word? But I don't know. You know how they said the means justify the ends, or does the end justify the means? Whatever. But she does take some of that money and helps the women in Nigeria. So her story as well is that She actually works to study the adult industry, like the porn industry, and she talks to men. Basically, she gives advice to men on how to be in relationships and stuff like that. So I thought that was really different. What's really particular about Omewago, apart from that, that's essentially the story of Dream Count of all these 4 women. So I lightly went through each one and their stories. I like to listen to it, but like I said, I might need to revisit this book. I really don't do rereads. I've never done rereads, but I feel like I need to read this one physically versus listening to it. Listening to it was good. Like I said, I like the different accents that the ladies in this book had, that they were given. Plus, Chimamanda Ngozi does read her own. She reads the character of Chiamaka, so that was nice. So it's a 3 out of 5, you guys. Like, there was nothing spectacular, but there was nothing like like it was a good read. You know what I mean? Like, it was a good read. It was a story about women and older women navigating life, talking about their relationships and all the stuff that afflicts women, and talking from different perspectives, and her talking about social issues as well, you know, African Americans and the Black diaspora and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, I would recommend, you know, it's her, I would recommend it. So 3.75 out of 5. I think that's good, right? That's right. And then the physical book, and then we'll talk about, so this one is too skinny for me to talk about it. Like, it's a Women's Liberation and the African Freedom Struggle by Thomas Sankara. You know, obviously it was Women's International Month in March, and I highlighted this whole book. I don't even think I can explain to you this book perfectly. Let me just read a few quotes, and I suggest, it's so skinny. I finished it in like a few hours. Like, you guys need to read it. Like, so Thomas Sankara was obviously the president of Burkina Faso, okay? He was born in 1949, okay? And he went into military school because back then that was the career for most black men. And obviously, when you know the story of Thomas Sankara, he was just outraged by the lives of his fellow people and how the Western world had taken advantage of Burkina Faso. So in 1986, so it's on August 4th, 1983, him and his soldiers toppled down the president that was there, Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo, and then led the revolution, the Revolutionary Party for 4 years. And this book is simply about the big speech that he made for women. He said that, you know, no nation is free until the women of that nation are free. You know, the fight needed to be fought by both men and women. So let me just read you guys a couple of quotes here, because like I said, it's hard for me to talk about these books because it's so tiny that y'all need to read. So before Sankara died, he said something that was I found remarkable. He said, revolutionaries as individuals can be killed, but you cannot kill ideas. So I like that. So he says here, so nothing definitive or lasting can be accomplished in our country as long as a crucial part of ourselves is kept in this condition of subjugation, a condition imposed over the course of centuries by various systems of exploitation. During Thomas Sankara's reign, he did a lot for his countrywomen, you know. He built hospitals, he built schools, he built roads. He talked about how over 92% of people in Burkina Faso were illiterate. So like I said, once he took power, he did things for peasants in terms of prices, for food, crops, and things like that. He launched tree planting and irrigation projects. Immunization campaigns were happening. He made basic health care services available for millions. By 1985, infant mortality had fallen from 208 for every 1,000 live births at the beginning of the decade to 145. You guys, like I said, like it tackled a lot of things. Let me just read you 2 more quotes. This part, he says here, it is true that both the women and the male workers are condemned to silence by their exploitation, but under the current system, the worker's wife is also condemned to silence by her worker husband. So he was talking about how during that time you had the class, you had classism happening, but you also had that dynamics between a husband and a woman. So imagine the husband going to work, he's already ostracized, he's already being dominated, so by the time he comes to his house, he wants his woman to be subordinated to him, to be his subordinate, so there was no freedom there. So the woman is having like double sufferings. That's what he was talking about, right? First of all, is being a woman, and then being like, in other words, in addition to the class exploitation coming to both of them, women must confront a particular set of relations that exist between them and men, relations of conflict and violence that use physical differences as their pretext. Yeah, like he talked a lot. So like I said, in conclusion, he said that the liberation of women in Burkina Faso is an extension of women around the world. There was so many things he said, and I think it's a very important book to read for African women first, Black women around the world second, and then the rest of women around the world. So I'm not rating this book. It was interesting. I mean, it's an important read. And finally, the two books that I listened to. So I listened to Indigo by Beverly Jenkins, which again was actually my first romance book by Beverly Jenkins, and I have to admit, it was a good time. It was free on Audible, so like I said, I was reading books by women through and through, and this was actually historical romance. It's my first time reading a Black historical romance, because for people who watched my first video when I was introducing myself, I grew up reading historical romance, but white people, because it was white stories. I didn't know there was Black historical romance, so anyways, so yeah, Indigo is this Black beautiful girl who is it the 1700s? I'm trying to remember what time the story is set in, but I'm thinking it's the 1700s, 1800s, during the railroad conductors time. So yeah, her name is Hester, but she is known by her loved ones as Indigo, and the reason why they call her Indigo is because of her hands. She's the descendant of an enslaved parents, and when they used to work in plantations with indigo, their hands were stained. So yeah, but now she was freed, so she's free, and she lives on this property. But then, like I said, she's part of these of the Underground Railroad. Now the only thing is that job is fraught with risks, you know what I mean? And it's weird because in the story you are shown how her house had these tunnels like behind walls, and how she would welcome runaways and help them. It's a whole system. So anyways, obviously it's a romance story. One day there's this man who's injured and who finds himself at the step of her house, and she takes care of him, only to find out that this guy goes by the name of Black Daniel. He's this handsome man of, I was gonna say Portuguese descent. Is he Creole? He's definitely of mixed race, and very much a somebody. Okay, he's a somebody. That's all I gotta say. So obviously she nurses him to health, and they start talking, and she discovers that, like I said, he goes by the name of Black Daniel, and then he actually is on the run as well, because they're looking for him, those slave chasers, those slave catchers. Yeah, so he's on the run, and the reason why he was injured, was because someone blew the whistle on him. Okay, but anyways, a story will develop between them, but Indigo does not want to get involved, or her heart get involved, because funny thing is, she's actually engaged to a Canadian guy, believe it or not. So I love the Canadian aspect of it. I love the historical aspect, because yes, Beverly talked a lot about a lot of historical facts that were happening during that time, the revolutions, the wars, how people were, protesting against, the slavery abolitionists. Like, she talked about all that good jazz, like my kind of stuff. The only thing is, because I was listening to it, I was not able to highlight certain things. So that's the only thing with when I listen to books that have historical important stuff. So she didn't want to get involved with them because, one, like I said, they're of different classes. Even though she's free, he's of a different class, like he's of a higher class. And even during that time among black people, there were like the white people, the black that could pass for white, and they couldn't really mix with just the dark skin. Like, she talks about all of that stuff. So obviously Black Daniel pursues her. There was an aspect where once they got to know each other better and he was healed, he does leave because he's on a mission. He's always on a call to go help some runaways. So before, when he came back, he like bought a property that was near Indigo, and she was like, who is this guy? And come to find out, it was Black Daniel. So that's when she started discovering that this guy was more than he was letting on, you know what I mean? And he does one day come through the tunnel to surprise her with the flowers. So I really enjoyed the romance. It was really cute. It was really cute. So it was 4 out of 5 for my first Beverly Jenkins historical romance. I really enjoyed it. So I know I'm trying to see what else I can say. Like, there's a lot more that happens in the story, you know what I mean? Like, there's this guy, like one of the slave catchers, who was very foul, was really horrible, and who does terrible things. And one thing before I conclude, actually, I wanted to talk about one thing that Beverly touched on in this story, is how certain black people, in order to save their own family members, had to be snitches, basically, and I don't ever want us to judge people back then, because none of us can ever grasp the brutality and the times that were that was slavery, right? So when you have certain black people that were able to run, even though they knew that if they get caught, one, they would be back to bondage, or two, they could get tortured and killed. You also had those that their family members were taken, but they are told that you can get reunited with your family only if you give up this information. Okay, guys, like I said, like, it's not, we can't judge. Like, we just, it's what it is. It's unfortunate, but some black people had to betray their own folks in order to save their own family members. It's really unfortunate. But yeah, that's one aspect that she talked about in the book. So yeah, like I said, 4 out of 5 I would recommend for people who love romance and also history, the two together. What a marriage, right? What a marriage. Okay, anyways, yeah, I'm sweating. That means I've been talking for a long time. So finally I read Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. Now my only thing is, I actually took notes, y'all, so we're gonna go through my notes. Okay, Legend Born, the main character is Miss Matthews, Brianna. Alice is her friend. They're in a university campus, and I think it's a university campus for just white people, and basically, I guess that. The beginning of the story, there's a creature that attacks Bree, Esel. Okay, and then there's a mention of Golden Boy Nick. So when I first picked up this book, y'all, I just want to say I didn't read the synopsis. I saw that this book was just on many black booktubers, list to read, even on non-black booktubers. But I was like, okay, and then you have a black girl on the book, so I was drawn. I was like, okay, this is a black fantasy. Like, okay, I'm good. I read fantasy. So I'm like, sign me in. So anyways, so little alarming sign for me is that we have a golden boy by the name of Nick. So I'm like, okay, because y'all know I read Forged by Blood, and I talked about the whole main character being white, and okay. Anyways, then at the beginning of the story, it's already in the synopsis. Obviously, there's an event that happens with her mom. She is killed, and then there's mention of the police who looks like he's a racist cop. I marked it here. And then there's the first sign of magic. I think ether, that's what they called when they tried to, I guess, erase her memory with ether. That's the first sign of magic during that time when she's, her mom's death is being talked about. Merlin, a king's mage. Okay, sorry guys, because it was complicated, right? Some people DNF because it's a bit intricate, so that's why I just took these notes because I was listening to it. So I was actually listening to it while sitting down. Usually when I listen to my audio, I'm working on, I'm doing something. So this one, I'm like, it's a fantasy, I need to know what's going on. And then ether roots. She meets Patricia. Patricia is this she's a psychologist, and by her father's commandment, he's like, okay, you need to go see Patricia because you're going through some stuff and you need to talk to someone. So Patricia's there and she talks to her about roots. And then there's mention of the Round Table of King. So obviously this is a take on King Arthur's, it's a retelling on King Arthur's story. She basically discovers that her mom's death was not accidental. So hence why she gets involved with Nick, the golden boy, and the whole mage and the magic and everything to come to discover what really truly happened to her mom. They talk about incorporeal, like I guess they become physical. I have no idea. Then is question mark, is Bree once born? Maybe. And then there was mention of demons and hellhound. Y'all know I don't do paranormal stuff, right? But like, it's a midnight, like it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I'm listening to this and they're talking about freaking demons and hellhounds. And I'm like, okay. So essentially there is portals that are being opened and these creatures are coming from those portals. And these portals are being opened at high speed. So there's also that needs to be figured out. A sign. Camlin is coming. I guess that's the Armageddon. Yeah, root is explained by Patricia. So she talks about blood crafters and how they steal power. So basically, Patricia's people, they usually borrow the roots. They borrow, and I guess they have to return it back. Because if they don't, there's always the ancestors are gonna come and recollect their debts. But then there are blood crafters. They're the ones who just take power and then don't return the power. And I think that's what they're dealing with. And then there's this whole memory walk. So at some point, Bree has a memory walk where she remembers a memory that her mom told her when she was young, and you could see that during that memory, her mom is telling her, if you're listening to this, then that means, I am gone. And during that memory, her mom explained that there is a curse that was bestowed upon the women of her line. Okay, so she discovers that. So I'm gonna conclude because I talked, like I said, even though I tried to shorten this. But my only thing with this, and I actually regret buying the whole collection because I have Bloodmark and I have Oathbound. So because for me, I knew it was gonna be like a whole black characters. Yeah, of course you need to have it diverse, but it's mainly main black characters, fantastic word and all that stuff. So the positive thing that I enjoyed with the story was obviously the way the story was told. I like Bree as a character. She is facing the racism that is part of South Carolina. I think that's where she is. And she faces them, she talks about them, and I like that aspect because we can't run from what is still there. Okay, so I also like the fact that she talked about like being close to ancestors, calling out to ancestors. I love that. Like, she removed that whole white Christianity, patriarchy world and all that stuff. I love the whole calling on ancestors. That was scary, but there's a part where she is possessed by her grandmother. Okay, I said it. Okay. So anyways, apart from that, they're all white. She's the only black girl. Like, I know it's a school that's all white school, but couldn't there have been a black boy? You know, it was so confusing for me because as I was listening to the audio, the narrator, who's the narrator? What's her name? The narrator, I know she's black, okay, because her voice sounded familiar. Like I've listened to other books that she's narrated before. So whenever she would do the voice of Nick or Cell, I was confused. I thought they were black, especially Cell. You know, the way she made him rough, like even the thing is, because it was a black voice that was doing these white boys characters, I saw them in my mind as black. At least Cell. Nick could be golden, but even the voice she was doing for them, for Nick, it just sounded black to me. But I know, and I went on Google and I was like, what color is Cell? They obviously describe them as white. And everybody else is white. So I was like, okay, so that was my only thing. And that her love interest, like I said, it has nothing to do with like, you know, like, oh, you know, no, it's just like when we read black fantasy, I want, it's, you know, there's a lot of white fantasy, like, let's just say it, there's a lot of them, you know. So the rare moments when we have black fantasy and it's very interesting, we just want a little bit of black love, you know. That's it. Like, she could have written a character, a black boy character. So again, this is just from you know, Legendborn. I'm not sure if maybe in the black what is it, blood mark there would be, I don't know. But anyways, that was my take on the book. I literally don't know why I picked the whole trilogy, but it's a 3 out of 5 because, like I said, it had good aspects to it. I'm just, yeah, that's it. So yo, I finally did my, I'm done, y'all. That's it. So guys, I'm tired. I need to drink, and I need to drink. So that's it, you guys. All the 8 books I read for the month of March. Very women, feminine, you know, I love that for me. And very diverse. I read Canadian, I read African American, I read African. I love that I was, you know, around the world. So yay for me. Anyways, you guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I apologize for the fact that it was long. Please, you know, bear with me. I do these once a month, so I'm sure you can tolerate me, you know, once a month, right? Okay, so if you don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in my next video. But if you do not want to comment, what can I ask you to leave that represent women? A woman emoji and a heart of any color. Okay, so thank you guys again for sticking through this video. Thank you. Bye.